Blog Talk Radio. All right, folks, it's your host, Tia Star. That's right, Tia Star with 2 R's, because one is just not enough for that make you feel good feeling. I'm having a great day today. I'm in the building, and I hope you are too. I want to talk about the Tia Star Show a little bit and tell you just about what's going to happen here. We're going to have fun. We're going to talk. We're going to laugh. We might even cry a little bit. That's because the Tia Star Show is just not about Tia Star. It's about you, and it's about us. It's about our sharing, caring, our knowledge, our wisdom, our spirituality, and giving back to each other. On the Tia Star Show, we address a lot of topics from spirituality, health, wealth, business, finance, you name it, sometimes even romance. But Tia Star is just not about Tia Star. It's about Tia Star giving, sharing, and it's a passion that I have for giving back to the community. So I'm inviting you to join me, your host, Tia Star, each day on the Tia Star Show. And don't forget, if you want more Tia Star, you can always visit her at tiastar.com. That's Tia Star with 2 R's, because one is just not enough for that make you feel good feeling. I thank you, and I hope you enjoy.
All righty, everyone out there. Great to have you back on the Tia Star Show presents the Cancer Positive Network with my co-host, Mark Jennings. Are you here with me today, Mark?
I'm here, Tia.
Amen. All righty, and we have a very special guest today. Our guest is Ken Kaloff, and he is an amazing man. I don't even have words for his testimony and what he's going to give and share to you guys today about being a cancer survivor and also a caretaker, but also an advocate for cancer and cancer awareness. Ken, do we have you here today?
You do, Tia. Thank you. I hope I can live up to that introduction.
Oh, I think you can, without a doubt. All righty. Since we only have a half an hour and it gets pretty jam-packed with information, Ken, I'm just going to let you go right into it and share with our audience who you are and why you're here and what you like to give as a positive message.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Tia, and thank you, Mark. I really was interested in this when I found out about the show, and I found out through Mark because, as you said, I am a survivor. I was a caretaker. And just to get into this, my whole journey with cancer, and it was about a 10-year journey, started back in 1993. Before that, my family, we were the Brady Bunch. We had no significant health problems. If you said cancer, I ran and hid under my bed. And so really, as we talk about this journey, it made me believe in a greater something, energy, God, whatever you want to call it, but it really prepared me for what was to come, and it prepared my family for what was to come. So in 1993, I was diagnosed with testicular cancer, and I was diagnosed with seminoma testicular cancer, which is the better of the two that you can get. I think the important thing to let people know, I knew I had cancer probably for 6 months before I really approached a doctor. I went to the library. I looked up all my symptoms. Yeah, it's kind of scary. I would look up my symptoms at the library. I would go on the Internet, and I'd read 10 symptoms for testicular cancer. I'd say, oh, I only have 9, so I'm okay. And I'd go to the gym and exercise.
I would call that denial.
Denial, major denial. And,
I know all about that, yes.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Mark, because as I discussed this with one of my physicians later on, he told me that the average person does ignore their symptoms for 6 months, and really not a good thing. So if we can get that message out first, that's really important.
Well, I was only 3 weeks, so I feel good now.
Well,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay, because I lied to the doctor when I went in. I had, one night finally, I felt like someone had kicked me down there, and I couldn't sleep all night, and I was in horrible pain, and this was because my tumor started to bleed. And when I went to the doctor the next day and they were asking me questions, I was still in denial. I said, oh, this just started last night. So I was fortunate because when they did my surgery, they went in for what they felt was a torsion or a twisted testicle, so they went in one way. But if a knife hits cancer cells, it blows them all over your body. So my physician was skilled enough that when he saw that I had cancer, he closed me up and went in another way. And so I found out I had cancer when I woke up. You know, my doctor, as I'm coming out of general anesthetic, says, I'm sorry to have to tell you have cancer. I'll be back to talk to you when you're a little more awake. So that was a bit scary. but as things progressed, we did a lot of research. And I don't want to get bogged down in too many details. We did a lot of research on the type of cancer I had and found that I was going to be fairly fortunate. I went through radiation therapy. I did 6,000 rads. I did 150 rads a week for like 6 weeks. 150 rads a day, I'm sorry. And I would do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday I would have off, and then Thursday, Friday. And usually radiation's fairly benign, but mine was in my stomach, so it caused nausea. And, of course, I researched, and there was plenty of nausea medication out there that took away the symptoms and allowed me to live fairly normal. Before I move on, the one thing I do want to emphasize is that when I went back for my first checkup and I had to do my CAT scan, my surgeon was not big on me asking questions. I had a lot of questions, and he wasn't really interested in answering them. And I just want to stress to people that that's the wrong doctor. And I was with Kaiser, and I talked to a doctor I knew, and he told me, if you have a doctor who doesn't want to answer questions and listen to you, go find another one. And wow. Kaiser was very accommodating to finding me a new physician and one who was really willing to discuss everything with me. So I went through this 6 weeks of radiation, sort of got back on track, lost a lot of weight, I think as Mark had talked about, even on radiation because it was in my stomach. Family took a deep breath. We sort of wiped off our brow. We said, boy, we dodged a bullet there, and we moved on. Well, about give or take a month or two, about 15 months after my diagnosis, my mom called me, and she told me my sister, who was 35 at the time, had found a lump in her breast. Now, again, important that I had just gone through this because she went to a breast cancer surgeon, and they did a needle biopsy, they did an ultrasound, and to the best of their knowledge, he told her, this is a benign tumor, it's pushing on your chest wall, but get it out in a year and you'll be okay. And she was so nervous about what I had just gone through, she said, you know what, I have next Tuesday off, let's do the surgery. Unfortunately, that surgery yielded a fairly large tumor that was cancerous pushed against her breast wall. But we had some knowledge now, and we had a way to breathe and have some calm because we had dealt with this once already. And we found some good doctors again, and she chose to have a lumpectomy, totally her choice, and she had all the information. And then she did radiation to shrink the tumor, and she used a chemotherapy called Cytoxin to treat it. The interesting thing from a caregiver perspective, I'm sorry.
No, I'm just amazed with it because I know more about the background. I'm just listening right now because I'm amazed at knowing the story, and I just can't wait for our listeners to hear this. This is amazing.
But you know, and it's amazing and it's important because now my role switched, and she was leaning on me to be a caretaker because I had just gone through this, and I was riddled with guilt because I felt like I had cheated cancer. I did radiation, and I had a fairly benign, form of cancer that was easily treated, and she was going through a much more severe path. But ultimately, everybody's journey is their own, and as long as you're there to support them, and I was there to say, hey, it's going to be okay. Let's look at statistics. Tell us it's going to be okay. She was smart. If she had waited a year, certainly she wouldn't be here with us. And that's what I want to stress is when you think you have a problem, don't wait to go to the doctor. It's better to go and find nothing. And so we went through this journey with my sister. She was very good at compartmentalizing her life. So she continued to work about a half a day, through this whole treatment because it took her mind off of what she was going through.
Right.
Again, we got her through this, and we sort of wiped her forehead, and we said, wow, we dodged another bullet, and thank goodness, and let's get on with our lives, and let's forget about this cancer thing. We're good with dealing with it now, but it's time to move on. Well, about 12 months after that, my mom called me, and she said, gee, you know what, Ken? She said, I was taking a shower, and I felt a lump under my breast, but I've been painting, and maybe the paint got my lymph nodes aggravated. I said, Mom, go to the doctor. And so she went in, and unfortunately we found out she had metastatic breast cancer, fairly bad.
Right.
And again, fairly bad, but, my mom is still here with me, and 82 years old. She's living a great life. But again, we took an aggressive approach, and she had a radical mastectomy. We now had a pretty good team of oncologists, medical and radiation oncologists, working with us because we'd been through this twice.
Right.
And she went on a treatment of adriamycin first, which is a fairly brutal chemotherapy. She would have about 3-week intervals between the chemo, and she would take a drug called Neupogen to accelerate her white blood cell count so she'd be strong enough to take that next treatment.
Right.
But again, you learn people's strength. My mom was not someone I viewed as being very strong emotionally, and I can remember she was in the middle of this adriamycin treatment. I was sitting at her house, and she had sores under her tongue, and she looked like she was just barely hanging on. And her best friend called her, and she's on the phone. And she goes, "Oh, I'm fine. Oh, no, everything's. I just had lunch. Everything's great." Hung up the phone. I said, "Mom, what the heck are you talking about?" And she looked at me straight in the eye. She goes, "Ken, God forbid she should ever have to go through this. I don't want her to be afraid of the chemotherapy." She goes, "I'd rather her think it's not that bad." And so that was her way of dealing with it and dealing with her friends. And again, she had the radical mastectomy, and there's so much help out there. Nordstrom is a big resource for women who need, artificial breast, wear material. They're big with that. The Cancer Society has a lot of information on that. And eventually we got through it. She went from adriamycin to Cytoxan, which was a chemotherapy we were now familiar with. Had a long road to recovery and had lymph nodes removed. So for several years she had to just be careful of that arm because of the lymph nodes not being what they should be, in terms of blood pressure and that sort of thing. But again, she did great. Now, I want to say about 18 months after that, my dad found a lump in his neck. And again, we thought, well, we thought he'd been sick. He's got a cold. Go to the doctor, check it out. Well, now we've been through. It's interesting. Mine was not that bad. My sister's was not that bad, but a little worse. My mom's was pretty bad. But again, we were maintaining our composure now because we were sort of becoming experts in this cancer thing.
Right.
My dad was diagnosed with metastatic thyroid cancer. And it had spread pretty well, and it was in his lymph system. And so we really had to, again, really spring into action and find the best doctors we could. And we found a brilliant surgeon over at John Wayne Cancer Center. And he did, over a 3-year period, he did 8 surgeries on my dad, one of which was actually cracking his chest like open heart surgery and running those lymph nodes underneath that plane and removing those lymph nodes. But we weren't going to give up. I mean, we had pulled 3 people through this. We were going to pull a 4th one through this. And, we were doing everything we had to do and finding the right doctors, finding the right treatments, doing treatment you might not want to do. He was doing radioactive iodine that was so bad he was quarantined for 3 days, and so, but these were important treatments. And again, we pulled him through this, unfortunately, and the message is, look, we've all survived it. And we're all doing well. My dad's story didn't come out quite the same, but he was an anomaly. So we had completed all his surgeries and his 3 years of treatment. And the question became, because the thyroid cancer had spread so much, do we do radiation in the neck just as a prophylactic treatment to make sure that if there's any cancer cells anywhere, we're going to get them and just make sure it doesn't come back. And so at this point, and we're in Southern California, and that's where the John Wayne Institute is, we decided to take a trip out to MD Anderson in Texas and get some more information from doctors out there to figure out what to do. And so the doctors out there, the consensus was do the radiation treatment, but they said you're going to lose your salivary glands and you're going to lose your teeth. And we said, we're going to do the radiation. We're not going to lose the teeth. So the Internet's a wonderful place. We started doing some research again, and not so much researching the illness, but researching what we could do. And we found a dentist who was specialized in making dental plates to put on your teeth for radiation, for that very purpose, to save your teeth.
Okay.
And so we took my dad to this dentist. We had these plates made, and so he did the radiation with those plates. So he saved his teeth. He lost his salivary glands, and mouth was very dry. He had to, carry a spray bottle with him. We tried Saligen. We tried all the Western medicine available at our disposal to bring those salivary glands back, and we couldn't. So back to the Internet, and my sister had found I believe it was a Navy physician who had shown great success with regenerating salivary glands using acupuncture. So we emailed him, asked him if this was true. He said it was. We wanted him to treat my dad, but the complication was that he was a military doctor, and only if we could get approval from the Secretary of Defense could he do this. And, for various reasons, we didn't get that approval. This physician was so nice, he recontacted us via email. He was on a carrier somewhere. He had a medical oncologist at USC Norris who did acupuncture. And so he PDF'd these files to that oncologist. We used that oncologist. He did the acupuncture. He told us it would be about 12 treatments. I was with my dad on the 4th treatment, and he got in the car and he had a mouthful of saliva, which was, just one of the greatest days ever, because now we had beaten the teeth problem. We'd beaten the salivary problem. There's a restaurant in downtown L.A. called Felipe's that he went to when he was a kid. He's like, let's go get a sandwich at Felipe's. It was triumphant, and he gave a speech at our Thanksgiving that year, just thanking his doctors, thanking his family. Well, unbeknownst to us, he had another cancer that we didn't know about, and the statistic anomaly of having two simultaneous cancers is mind-boggling, but he did, and it was a cancer called multiple myeloma, and the radiation therapy ultimately pushed him from dormant multiple myeloma to end-stage multiple myeloma. And so we were back dealing with that again. This time, it just, his physician actually, his primary care doctor had been diagnosed with multiple myeloma at the same time he did, but beginning. And so he ended up living a very different life. My dad's had accelerated. We tried everything we could. There was a clinical trial. There's a doctor at Cedars-Sinai named Dr. Berenson who does wonderful things with clinical trials on multiple myeloma. My dad was really too far into it to get any clinical trials. And so at this point, about 4 to 5 weeks in, it was really showing its effects. And it became a different decision-making process, but one, because we had progressed through all this, we were really prepared to take on. And it was, how much treatment do you do at this point? And that was a decision largely left in my dad's hands. Multiple myeloma creates sheets of plasma, and it's a plasma cell leukemia, and it builds up protein, if I'm saying it correctly, and if I'm not, I can be corrected, but I believe it builds up protein in the kidneys. So he went into kidney failure, and he was on dialysis, and which is still doing great, but it eventually started to metastasize and got into his spinal column, and so the discussion becomes very different. It becomes a discussion, for him, it became a discussion of death and dying, and how did he want to live his life, and he really chose to come home and go off of chemotherapy. Now, I know it might sound strange to some of your listeners, but when you're faced with that and confronted with that, back to the research, and we found one of the most pleasant ways to pass, if you've got no choice, is to come off of dialysis. And so that was solely his decision. We were at home with him. I think the important thing there was just saying goodbye, which I'm so glad I did. We all had our private time with him, and we lost Dad, my goodness, in 2002. Okay. But everybody else is doing great. And I will tell you again, my other sister, and I have a fourth sister who sort of dodged all this, but I grew up on the beach, and she's had three bouts of very aggressive pre-melanoma. But again, not to spoil one, but we found a great general oncology surgeon rather than using anybody else. We used him, and she's fine. That was our choice again, is what surgeon we wanted to use. But it's about making decisions that you feel comfortable with, and just arming yourself with a lot of options, and knowing that cancer is not putting you on a death watch. That's what I felt like when I was diagnosed. And like I said, with the exception of my dad, which was really an anomaly, we're all here and living a great life.
Well, Ken, first off, wow. Let's just start with that. That's phenomenal in its own self. And I guess the first thing I wanted to ask was there a history of any cancer in your family at all? Was this just any? At all?
Well, that's a good question. And there was, on my mom's side, there was some history of breast cancer. But it's interesting because we have sort of a team of oncologists, and we asked that very question. But my dad's cancer certainly was not related to my mom's side of the family, and my cancer was. And they said sometimes in families you'll see these clusters that just occur. So it's a complicated answer. But yes, on my mom's side there definitely was, and I would suspect if my sisters tested, they would test positive for the BCR8 gene, but they've chosen not to do those tests. Okay.
And is there any particular reason, or just personal choice? You just don't, why? Or
Well, their choice was, again, one sister already had breast cancer. The other one,
right.
the oncologist basically told her, he said, if you test, you're going to test positive. I can tell you that already. So,
okay.
If you want to test, we can do it. If you don't, we can just be vigilant in, mammograms and following her, which is what they've done, and she's been totally fine.
Awesome. Okay, I see what you're saying. Now, if I'm correct, you said your mom is still here with us.
Correct.
And how many years has it been? You said since 93?
She was diagnosed in, I would say, about 95. And again,
95.
Just to put a little cap on that, oncologists usually are supposed to follow you for 5 years. She still sees her oncologist. She sees her oncologist every 6 months. Insurance is willing to let her do that. The oncologist is willing to see her, and it just gives her peace of mind. She runs the blood screens, and she has a checkup, and it just makes her feel better. But yeah, she's it's been a long time, and she has not had any negative ramifications from it.
Right, obviously. Now, I do know that you said you did a lot of research, a lot of Internet research. Some of the best blessings are just some of the, I guess you would say, unusual resources that most people aren't aware of. And that's the big thing that we're finding out here with Cancer Positive Network is that resources are a wealth of gold, and that there's still a need for more resources, more more research, more understanding of where to go, I guess in layman's terms. We're at about 8 minutes left on the show, but can you share that with our audience just in regards to how you got into understanding where to go and maybe to guide them with some direction on that?
I'll tell you a great resource. Some of it, like finding I wasn't the one who found this doctor that did the acupuncture, and I suspect that was just a general Google search. A great place to start is the American Cancer Society. They just have a wealth of knowledge and resources. They have one-to-one counseling they provide if you want it at no charge, and just a whole host of resources. And sort of we would use key terminology off of that and then start researching. We just did a general research on best breast cancer surgeons in the country, and it happened to be that this one gentleman is at local. So it was both tapping into those websites as well as just doing general searches on the topic. I wish I could be more helpful, but that's really how it went.
No, but I definitely know it's a great approach. It was very helpful for your family. You also mentioned something which we find to be very helpful. I know you were on both sides of the coin. You were a patient and a survivor, but at the same time a caregiver. I always got to ask, which was more difficult?
So, it's interesting for me, and I think for a lot of people, being a caregiver was more difficult than being a patient. And I say that because I guess as a patient, it was my destiny, and I was okay with, sort of feeling like I was in the driver's seat. But when it's someone you love and you're caring for, it's really tough, and you feel a little less in control and a little more helpless. And so I had all 3 times. I had a much more difficult time being a caregiver, but at the same point, the patient's looking for positive affirmation. Even when my dad was really thick into the multiple myeloma, I sat down with him, and it makes me cry. I cried with Mark the other day when I was telling the story. But I said, Dad, we're going to develop a plan and get you better, because that's what he needs to hear. So it's tough being a caregiver.
And I know you also mentioned when you finally, when your dad finally made the decision to come off chemo from the second time of being, when they really realized he had another form of cancer. You mentioned that you found a way or resources to help him pass peacefully. Could you share that with our audience? Because I know that's something that a lot of people out there could use. And
that was talking to physicians, and my wife's a physician, and she steered us to some people that would know more about that than she would, and we just asked a lot of questions of a lot of doctors, basically saying, if this was you, what would your decision be, and how would you choose to take this path? And it was unanimous that it was coming off of the dialysis, and then we started researching that, just Googling effects of coming off of dialysis, and you really see the picture.
Right, understandable. Mark, can you chime in here? You have any questions left? We got about 5 minutes left in the show.
Sure. This again, listening to the story again, and Ken, I was kind of wondering during that period, as kind of each person went down in a sense, what was, from a family point of view, was there a feeling of frustration or anger? I mean, how emotionally did you guys deal with all of that?
It's a firestorm, and when you hear the next diagnosis, you're almost in disbelief, and it's very emotional, and you take a moment and you cry, and you say, what the heck is going on? At one point I laughed and I said, well, who's next? Gosh,
right.
It's hitting everybody, but you need that moment. You need that with everyone. You needed that moment to cry and to sort of. It's like getting hit every time, no matter how many times you go through it. It's like being hit in the head with a baseball bat. But once you get through that initial phase, you really have to focus on, okay, what are we going to do to get this person better, and what resources do we have, and let's find the best doctors. Let's start talking to people. Let's check with the Cancer Society and see what our best course of treatments are. We didn't know about this Dr. Berenson at Cedars. We found out about him through a friend of ours who had dealt with multiple myeloma. So talking to other people that have had cancers is critical. And just to step back, it's probably irrelevant, but just to step back to you. So my dad, for both those cancers, chemotherapy was not a course of treatment for either one of them. So I just want to clarify for anybody listening if they're going through those.
Okay.
But it was coming off the treatments that he made that decision.
Okay. Understandable. And we've got about 3 minutes left in the show. I think the other question that I wanted to ask you, I know you've advocated a lot and you're very passionate about it. Could you share with our audience just, kind of how this turned you into an advocate and how much passion you have for it now?
It did, and I'll tell you, it was cathartic for me to talk about it, and everyone deals with it in their own way. I'm a talker. So the first thing I wanted to do was feel useful, and I connected with the American Cancer Society and just volunteered to work with them. Worked on Relay for Life, worked on just in a general office stuffing envelopes. They had invited me out to speak at several different events just to talk about what I've been through. And the volunteering, and then through that I was invited through the Cancer Society to go to Washington, D.C., for the first, and I forgot what they called it, but it's a Relay for Life in Washington, D.C., and then you go lobby Congress. And I had the privilege of meeting with Nancy Pelosi's office and talking about more money for colon cancer research. So I just, volunteering, advocating, talking about it is how I dealt with it best in getting through those years. And everyone's got to find their own way, but that's sort of how I came to it.
Awesome. And everyone can.
I was going to say, he's spoken at the American Red Cross. Is that right, Ken?
American Cancer Society, yeah, I did.
That's what I meant. Cancer, yes.
I was sharing with Mark the statistic, and I don't know if it's true anymore because this was about 2 years ago, but I was talking somewhere and ran across the statistic that, we think about 3,000 people passed from the World Trade Center, but, 1,500 will pass tonight from cancer, and that's why I'm so strong about advocating about finding research. And again, if I circle back to the front, the biggest weapon people have is if you think there's something wrong, get to the doctor as soon as you can. Don't be afraid of it. I was afraid of it, and I was very fortunate that I had a form of cancer that even though I waited 6 months, it wasn't a problem. But had my sister waited, we'd be having a very different conversation. So That's what I'm passionate about. I just want people to understand it's scary, but, my mom's cousin had stomach cancer surgery this morning, and she's doing great, but she found it really early, and she's going to be fine. So the earlier you find it, the better.
Wow. So in other words, don't wait, and when you do, don't be scared, and take care of it right away.
Right. You're going to be scared, but don't let that stop you, I guess is what I'm saying, because your chances of having 100% cure and walking away fine is much greater if you get it early.
Awesome. All righty, well, our half hour goes pretty fast, but it's jam-packed. Ken, I've got to have you back on the show, and we'll definitely talk more about how to definitely get you as a part of the network and advocating. I love to have you blogging and getting out there and really, really getting information and networking with those who really need the help. And, Mark, anything to say for our last words before we get off the air?
Or you want me to follow that?
No, I know.
Come on, Tia.
I know.
Man.
Well,
no,
I know.
Thank you so much for coming on, and that was amazing. And we'll look forward to having you on the show again and blogging and doing those kind of, as we build the network out.
Absolutely, whatever I can do to help.
Next time we'll have some callers for you. I'm sure. I don't think there was enough time to do it today, but we'll definitely get those in. So.
All right.
There you go.
Then.
Until next week.
There you go. Until next week. All righty, everyone. This is the Tia Star Show presents the Cancer Positive Network Show, and keep tweeting and keep making people aware of us. We're on Facebook. Like us at Cancer Positive Network at Facebook. You can also catch us on Twitter, and that's Cancer Positive, and that's Cancer_Positive at Twitter. And keep making people aware of this network. We're out here. We're for you, and we're here to help you. Take care, and God bless. Thank you.